Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. This is the Self-Control Show. I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer, and here's episode 4. Okay guys, we're going to talk about impulsivity on this episode, and I'd like to start off by just kind of giving a quick definition of what that is. Impulsivity, tendency to act quickly and without careful thought or consideration of the consequences, reflects an individual's tendency to behave with little foresight or regard for an outcome, and is often a response to a desire or urge. And then actions could be, risky, poorly conceived, inappropriate, or undesirable. And, really anything where in the moment you're deciding based off of a feeling as opposed to what might the best decision be possible. And, I'd like to start off by saying for most of these podcasts that I'm going to be doing, I would love for you guys to have listened to episode 3. So if you haven't listened to episode 3 yet, that's the foundations of self-control. I'd highly suggest going back to that one, just because we're going to be using some common terms and just have a common language for us. So it'll just make everything so much easier and make a lot more sense. So impulsivity. Why would somebody be impulsive? Well, a lot of times being impulsive is driven by the desire to get a dopamine hit. And if you don't know what dopamine is, basically it's like a neurotransmitter, chemical messenger that transmits signals from the brain and to the body and vice versa. When you experience something pleasurable, the brain releases dopamine, and it's like a reward system. And not only is it like a reward system in that, when you do an action, if you get a reward from it, your brain is more likely to do the thing again, okay? And another thing I'll add is, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist or a counselor. I am a coach, so I don't do any diagnosis or direct health directives, if you will. But I do know a fair share about the nervous system and how it's affected my own personal life in dealing with this stuff. So hopefully you guys find it helpful. And I want to start off by saying, if you identify yourself as somebody that is impulsive, I want you to know that that's okay and you make perfect sense. And why I say that is I'm hoping to release you from the shameful that grasp that shame has on you, and maybe the guilt and remorse you feel from your actions that you've taken that are impulsive, that maybe have not turned out too good in your life, which is probably why you're listening to this podcast. I know that's how I felt. And I want to start re-looking at your actions of impulsivity as more of a response, as opposed to who you are, or that's just who you are or what you do. Okay. And why I believe that to be the case is, I think what it boils down to is why is somebody impulsive? Again, I already kind of talked about the drive for dopamine, but underneath that is, again, understanding the upside down stoplight, which I talk about in episode 3, green, yellow, and red. Green being the newest functioning part of your nervous system in connection with your brain. The love, social connection, what it's responsible for is your highest state of functioning, your executive functioning, which is where you make the best decisions from, okay? And then the next ring down the ladder or step down the stoplight is yellow, which is your fight or flight response, mobilization. You're either experiencing, a direct potential threat, or the challenge in your life is so high that you're constantly in a chronic state of not knowing if you're safe or if there's a threat. And that could be physical, it could be financial stress, it could be relational, environmental. There's lots of different perceives stresses outside of just like somebody coming at you, that's angry. Something to keep an eye on or awareness to. And what happens when we go from green to yellow is probably the main thing to keep in mind as it pertains to this podcast is our mainframe starts shutting off. Our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that makes the best decisions, that can take a situation and weigh the benefits of how it's going to affect you now versus later. And that part of your brain starts to shut off when you're in yellow. And why that's the case is your nervous system perceives the threat now as way more severe as what's potentially going to happen in a week or a month or a year, etc. And so the part of your brain that can decipher those things is switched off. And you're only worried about surviving now. Because again, your nervous system's job is to keep you safe in the present, not to worry about you being safe or the best version of yourself and your well-being 5, 10, 50 years from now. Okay? So how does this relate to being impulsive is usually people that suffer from impulsivity, I know myself included, are in a chronic state of yellow. And again, when you're in a chronic state of yellow, most of the time your mainframe is shut off, right? And what you're doing is the actions that you're taking that are considered quote unquote impulsive are really just ways for you to get a hit of dopamine to get back to green, okay? And when you do that enough and you get rewarded enough for doing that quote unquote bad behavior, a part of you learns like, oh wow, when I do this thing, all that stress and anxiety goes away, albeit usually temporarily, because you get a hit of dopamine. And that regulates your nervous system, and that allows you to go from yellow to green. And you go from feeling stressed to not stressed. And again, when you learn that that's how it works, all of a sudden, that's the big aha for me. It's like, oh my gosh, it's not necessarily me that's impulsive. It's my response to the situation that is considered impulsive. But when you learn that it's just a response, guess what happens? You get to change your response, potentially. And that is done through building internal awareness of what state you're in. Okay, am I in green? Am I in yellow? Am I in red? And when you can properly start to identify the physical sensations that you experience, the feelings and the thoughts that you have that pertain to each state within yourself, you're going to start being able to go, instead of being stressed out or angry or irritable or whatever, you can be like, oh geez, I'm just in yellow right now. Or when you're, feeling sad, depressed, or you have like this clench in your stomach, or you're feeling overwhelmed or exhausted, or you're procrastinating, and you feel like just doing nothing, instead of shaming yourself for those feelings that you're having, you'd be like, oh, I'm just in red. And then you can start coming up with ways to get yourself from red to yellow and from yellow back to green. Same thing with yellow. When you realize that you have a tight chest, shallow breathing, and you're stressed out and anxious, and you're having these anxious thoughts and feelings, oh, I'm just in yellow. And recognizing and connecting the dots to old patterns and bringing awareness to that will allow you to take a pause. And just having the awareness that, oh my gosh, I'm in yellow, what that does is it turns your mainframe back on. It turns that green part of your brain back on and allows you to potentially bring the most advanced hardware into a situation where you would previously make an impulsive decision, and maybe bring enough green to that situation to weigh the risk versus reward of previously used situations to re-regulate yourself back to green and choose differently. And then you can start proving to the part of you that used to use whatever it was and make those impulsive decisions that there are other options for you out there. And again, when you're able to notice the feelings and them being just feelings as opposed to something to really be concerned about. Nobody's died from feeling feelings. Then you can start making new choices. And instead of making an impulsive choice based on a feeling of what would feel better, you can realize, oh my gosh, why would this choice make me feel better? Well, it's just because I'm in yellow. And making this decision would probably make me feel better temporarily. And since you notice you're just in yellow, all of a sudden you can bring a little green to it and be like, well, yeah, this would make me feel better now. But like, for example, would buying this thing really make me feel better long term? Or would maybe going out and going for a walk with a friend make me feel better right now? And then you start showing the part of you that used to buy things. Let's just say, for example, that there's another option to get back to green in a way that's not going to affect you near as, let's say, negatively long term as that other option. You can start carving out new pathways to make new decisions in response to previous yellow situations where maybe you would make a quote unquote impulsive decision, and that starts to be rewired as a new habit for you. And when you're able to do this with all aspects of your life, all of a sudden, number one, it takes the shame away from why you've been doing the things that you've been doing. And like for me, that was the biggest aha and the biggest cathartic release that I think that I've experienced is there was so much shame for me and guilt built into past decisions that I've made, and really like, how am I going to unwind all this stuff? And just like knowing that, oh, I was making those decisions, doing the best that I could with what I know, because I was stuck in a chronic state of yellow, and that's all it was. And now that I know it's just yellow and it's just things associated with yellow, I can start unwinding and just making different decisions when I do feel that stress or that anxiety or whatever it is. I can improve my relationship with that and then choose different ways and other situations to get myself back to green. And all of a sudden I become that good self-parent that I never had. And I can start proving to myself over and over again that yellow is just a state and it's temporary, and I don't have to stay here, and I can be back in green in other ways that I used to choose before. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If this is you and you want more intensive coaching, I offer a 12-week program called Reclaim Control, where we dive deep on this stuff, especially when it comes to doing an optimized and customized plan just for you. There's that free guide again that'll be in the show notes that you can check out Foundations of Self-Control, where I talk more about this stuff. And hopefully this was helpful. If you guys have other topics you want me to talk about and kind of like bring it back into the relevancy of how I would approach handling that for yourself, send me a DM on Instagram. Jason Schnitzer Coaching is the best place to reach out for me for that. And yeah, thanks for watching, you guys, and catch you next one.